I just was having flashbacks of the night before, and I realized like my ears were filled with tears. Like it was just pouring down my face as I was lying there. And I rolled up my mat really quickly at the end, and I kind of just scooted out. Usually we linger, and my friend had to kind of run out after me, but I was just in the car sobbing, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what we're gonna do.
Hi, my name is Isabel. You're listening to The Sober Spell. Today I am here with Lori Ann. I know that's not your government name anymore, but I always want to say Lori Ann. For the people that don't know you, who are you?
Hi, my name is Lori Ordoliva Donnelly. The Ann was dropped. And I am the mother of a recovering alcoholic. This girl right here.
Yeah, if the curly hair wasn't a giveaway in the matching posture. Yeah, we are parent and child. But so we brought my mom on today because, we always talk about how alcoholism is a family disease. Like if the alcoholic is a puzzle piece, when they become addicted, their puzzle piece changes. All of the pieces around them in the family unit have to change as well to continue to fit. When the alcoholic starts working a program, gets sober, their piece changes again to continue to fit functionally and cohesively. All of the other pieces also have to change.
Yep.
So Mountainside offers a lot of family supports, and my mom has been described by me, a lot of my friends who are in recovery, and my fiance who's in recovery as the ideal recovery parent. Like, I don't know, she's always sought to understand, to support in the best way that she can, and also to work on her own recovery, which I've been extremely fortunate in. So yeah, we wanted to have her on to talk about that today, because Mountainside has a myriad of family services that are super helpful and super necessary, and a lot of people should take advantage of them. So we'll take it all the way back to high school for you, because I know, obviously, when I started struggling, a big thing that you would talk about is having experience with that, like in high school, having a friend who struggled, and there was a lot of comparison there to like your experience and versus what was happening with me. And so I think also my progression from being just depressed and mentally ill to an alcoholic wasn't overly shocking. So it kind of continued down that path to a certain extent.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, well, I think in high school, and actually before high school, I struggled a little bit with like some suicidality. And what I didn't recognize necessarily as depression, but, looking back, realizing that I struggled a little bit with depression. And going into high school, I had one of my closest friends, who ultimately was later diagnosed, with mental illness. But she was, very suicidal, attempted to commit suicide on multiple occasions, which we were constantly, sort of trying to get in the way of. And to, I remember, her taking a handful of pills, right before school. And I had study hall the first 2 periods of the day. And so she did it before she got to school, figuring I wouldn't be there to do anything about it. And that day, for some reason, I got up early and I had my sister bring me into school. And so when she was coming down the hall, she saw me and she was like, damn it. And she was with another dear friend of ours. And I found out that she had taken a bunch of pills. And we kind of, my friend and I, we kind of walked around. I remember, it's kind of a blur, but I remember walking down to the nurse and asking, what is this drug? And like, what will it do? Because we're like, all right, what's going to happen to her? And then calling my other friend's sister, older sister, and asking her, like, what's this going to do? She had some knowledge of I think she worked in the medical field in some way. And so we ultimately didn't get any help from the adults because we didn't want to get her in trouble. But we ultimately were in the lavatory, and I had her jammed over the toilet trying to stick my fingers in her throat to make her throw up. And kids were in there, smoking cigarettes and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And we were, the three of us were all sobbing while my friend kind of fought us off. And a teacher finally came in, and then, they broke it up and an ambulance took her away. And I was pretty depressed after that. It was pretty, it was a weird time because we were referred to as the accomplices, and, just, it was not a great time. But she ultimately came back to school briefly. Her mother moved her out of town. And we really didn't see her much, but we still talked to her pretty regularly. And she went down a pretty bad path of, using drugs, and, she had a heart attack at like 19, and just kind of, she was always chasing that high, and we were always trying to rein her in. And the last time that I saw her as a friend was, I had gone out to see her and spend some time with her, and she was selling drugs. She was doing drug deals, not telling me that she was doing drug deals, but clearly doing drug deals while I was with her. And just, I was so uncomfortable the whole night that I remember not sleeping the whole night and kind of like holding on to my purse because I'm like, what's going to happen here? And leaving the next morning and crying the whole way home because I was like, she can't be in my life anymore. And realizing I just, this was going in a path that like, I don't have any control of this. So feeling like I had no choice but to walk away. And so when you started struggling, the depression thing, I was like, oh, that's not uncommon. I struggled with this, and my heart broke that you were going through it, because I can look back at my old journals, and I remember crying when you guys were babies, reading my old journals, because I was like, please don't let her go through this. And so when it happened with you, I was like, so bummed out and just so sad for you. But also feeling hopeful because, I was pretty high functioning depression. Like I've always people would always tell me, they're like, I would never ever know that you struggled with depression because I'm like, happy girl. And so, I was literally the class clown in high school and in elementary school. And so, but I think that's pretty common too. And so I thought, well, we can get you through and you'll be okay because eventually you're going to come out the other side. And ultimately it just kept getting worse and worse. And I remember when you were diagnosed and me talking to you about, you have to be careful with alcohol and drugs, and, you're more susceptible. And, just talking to you about it's normal to drink, with friends or something, but if you find yourself doing it on your own, that's a problem. Come and talk to me, and just kind of always opening up dialogue with you, hoping that, oh, well, I'm so open, she'll be so open.
Yeah, and that's almost never how it works. I always talk,
exactly.
When I speak at high school, that's always the main thing, is finding someone to talk to if you're struggling, because obviously as a kid, you're not going to feel comfortable talking to your parents, because at the same time as, they're the closest people, figures in your life, responsible figures, hopefully in your life, they also are disciplinarians to a certain extent,
Yeah.
and so it can be uncomfortable. And I think it's super interesting how the process with your friend also very closely mimicked kind of your progression with my alcoholism, going from a place of being damage control, trying to reel it in, trying to, like you said, always chasing that high, and trying to rein her in and pull her back, and then eventually having to be I can't do anything about this, and getting to that point, as painful as that is. And I think your experience in high school also speaks to the transition from the shame and the war on drugs, and the just say no, not having people in your school that were supportive of you or helpful in that is so crazy and so reflective of the times. That's not the case today.
Right.
Yeah, and especially mental illness being demonized to a certain extent.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I remember you knew about my friend, and I remember you being very concerned because I had walked away from her. And you thinking, oh, doesn't that mean that you're going to walk away from me? And I remember, saying like, I might walk away from you sometimes because I need space, but I'm never leaving. Like I'm never ever leaving. And then, but with the drug use, I mean, you were angry because I was always getting in your way. And I remember saying like, you're asking me if you're my child and you're standing on the train tracks and there's a train coming, I'm going to pull you off no matter what. And that was kind of how I felt like that's the existence I was living for years.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Until you had gone to rehab and then you had come out and then you had relapsed. And it was me saying like, I can't do anything else here. If you can either accept our help or you have to be out of our lives. Which is freaking awful. Like it's awful. And it was a gamble, right? Like you don't know that it's going to work out, but I knew that like what we were doing wasn't working.
Yeah, and that's like the scariest thing for parents a lot of times. And like you were saying, living in that space, like that's stressful to say the least. Space, like sometimes when I talk to clients and they're like, well, I didn't steal from my parents, or like I was away, like I wasn't hurting them. It's like you were stealing their peace. You were stealing their time. You were stealing their sleep. Like when you're in treatment, even if you don't want to be here, at least you're giving them that like respite from the emotional turmoil they've been going to. Because I mean, that takes years off your life. Like, sorry, what is it? Your telomeres. I've been wearing them down. Tough. She's a scientist. We're doing science talk.
Dad's telomeres. My gosh.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Pat McCarthy here. For veterans and military families facing addiction or mental health concerns, Mountainside is here. We accept Humana, TRICARE, and are a proud member of the VA CCN, ensuring accessible, high-quality care. Our specialized programs and staff for military experience understand your journey, providing the targeted support for healing and recovery. If you or a loved one needs help, please call 860-824-1397.
Yeah, and so you've talked to me about how when you walked in, there was one time you walked into my room and I was funneling alcohol into a water bottle. And you were like, oh no, like now we're doing this?
Yeah.
Now we're doing this? Yeah, which is terrible. And obviously, like, you try to intervene in any way that you can. And I'm sure most parents are like this, where it's you don't know, like, where the line is. Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
There's no right answer. Because also everyone's, like, kid that's struggling is different. Like, everybody needs a different thing. And I think about that all the time. Like, being in that kind of situation, what would that be like? And it's, like, backed into a wall, like, backed into a corner.
Very, very much so. And you're so bright and compelling an arguer. We always said, like you're going to be an attorney someday. Like,
I can't 'cause I cry when I argue.
Yeah. Well, you didn't back then.
Yeah.
You're just mean.
Yeah.
and I knew that this was the hill that I needed to be on. But man, you would dismantle everything that I thought, and you would leave me speechless and feeling like an idiot. Even though I knew I was right, but you were so good at just poking holes in everything and making me feel so small back then.
Yeah, I like to be difficult.
Yeah, you do.
That's not really different.
Right.
Like, now I still do that. Or even with my fiance, I'm like, well, and?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm right. I'm right. It's tough. Not easy to deal with sometimes.
No.
I'm better at, like, having space between the action and the reaction to a certain extent now in a lot of different aspects of my life. But so back when I first started drinking and using in an alcoholic way, because I'd been dabbled like a little bit previous to that, but when it first started becoming a big issue, I remember you like sitting me down. It was after New Year's. It was I was 18. It was after New Year's, and you're like, why don't you slow down a little bit, basically, to show that you, like, it's not a problem, like, prove it. And it's so funny because I do this now with clients with, like, moderation. I'm like, okay, if you're not an alcoholic, like, don't drink for 60 days, cool, you've shown you can do it. Let's try moderation. And I used the analogy as it relates to like drinking and smoking weed, where I was like, well, I don't need to have a PB&J every day. I don't know if you remember this, but I'm like, I don't need to have a PB&J every day, but I really like PB&Js, so I'm going to have one every day. It doesn't mean I need it, but it's like I want it, so why would I not? But I don't have to do it. I just want to.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, it's like, what do you even do with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that's like the insanity of alcoholism, like the mental gymnastics of like me convincing myself that this is fine, everybody else is crazy.
Yeah.
Like this is okay. And you seem to know from the beginning that it was going to be a serious issue, because you sat me down before I was supposed to go to school, and like you're like, why don't you defer and stay home, because you'd seen like my drinking and everything ramping up, or me having like a fixated pointed interest in it, and asked me to defer because you were worried about what would happen if I went to school. Because I'd always been, up until that point, like emotionally and behaviorally out of control with certain things. So
Yeah.
I'm sure when the alcohol was in the picture, it was like, ugh.
Yeah.
Which I was talking to, we had someone else on here that went to Keene, and I was like, it was a real selling point to me that there was like a big like meth problem in the area. I was like, oh, I could get into that.
Yeah.
I've got some time on my hands, and it's also like economic. So
Yeah.
so you weren't wrong in that, but then obviously things just like degraded over the course of that year too, regardless.
Yeah. Well, and it was, I wanted to be supportive and trusting that, like, okay, you have the information, and I'm not going to stop you from going to school. And, it's going to happen. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But over the summer leading up to you going to school, you became so avoidant about talking about anything about school, that, we were kind of like, this is, I had you set up with all, like, in every way possible once you went, but you wouldn't even talk about going. And so, yeah, like 2 weeks before you went, we were like, we can't send her. She's going to die.
Yeah.
But, I'm not sure what was the right decision. You were definitely, I feel like the path was going to be the same either way. It's just that the path was, you were under our roof, so we could jump on it when it happened.
Which it's also, it's like, and that's the whole thing with like the illusion of control too, because it's like, just because I can see it and I can touch it doesn't mean I have any, like, it's still escalated to like a really serious point regardless. And so it doesn't, there's always like the what if, like, what if I did this, but there's no like right answer at the time. You're just doing the best that you can, and it would have escalated to that point anyways. And I remember before, it was before I had the really serious overdose, where I was like sitting in a car with a boyfriend at the time, and I was freaking out because I was like, I can see the path I'm going down, and I can see that it leads to me dying or like something serious happening. And despite that, I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing. And that's really scary for me to have. And so I think that was always kind of the trajectory and like the school of thought I was in. I just wasn't always fully aware of it.
Yeah.
But I had overdosed at one point. It was Good Friday. Happy Good Friday.
It wasn't our Good Friday.
Hey, yeah, it was a bad
Friday for us.
Yeah. It was an awkward drive to Easter lunch. It was terrible. But yeah, so I overdosed on Good Friday, and you were there, and you had found me, and then the next day you went to yoga.
Yeah, that was it's fun. As soon as you said that, I can feel it. That was when I realized we were there.
Yeah.
Your friend had filled our downstairs bathroom sink with her vomit, and
we don't need to get super into it either.
And me trying to walk you around, but I went to yoga the next morning with our neighbor, a good friend of mine, and I told her, and I was angry going, I was frustrated, and I was like, and telling her about it when we got there, and as we did yoga, and I kind of was able to get out of my head. And during Shavasana at the end, where you just sort of you just depleted and you're laying on the mat. And I remember laying there, and it's usually like almost like a kind of a spiritual experience. Like you're drained and you just like breathe and, come back to yourself. And I realized, I just was having flashbacks of the night before. And I realized like my ears were filled with tears. Like I was it was just pouring down my face as I was lying there. And I rolled up my mat really quickly at the end, and I kind of just scooted out. Usually we linger, and my friend had to kind of run out after me, but I was just in the car sobbing, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what we're going to do. And that's when we got you into the IOP.
Yeah, I went to IOP, and there's like a really classic, like when we have clients that go to IOP and they end up at residential, I'm like classic IOP to residential pipeline. Because it's
Right.
always, a lot of times it's like for addicts and alcoholics, when you're backed into a corner, it's like, fine, I'll go to IOP because that feels not super definitive.
Yeah.
Like it's like I can do that and I don't actually have to change my behavior. And so inevitably you get bumped up to a higher level of care. And I remember being there and I was like, I'm not going to get sober, like saying that to people, where I was like, I'm here. I'm not here to get sober. I'm just like here to check a box. And they were like, oh.
Yeah.
And they bamboozled me into doing an intake for residential while I was there. I didn't know I was in an intake for residential. I've since read the notes of that intake. And
Surprise!
I didn't know I was in there. But yeah, in the notes for the intake, it was like not ready for treatment, like not, which like it's true. I wasn't ready for treatment. And so after, I think I was in the IOP for a couple of weeks before I had like the really serious overdose that was like a medical. I've since I have a paramedic friend, and then she was like, oh, that was like a real emergency, like all of the stuff that's happened.
Yeah.
And also like not being brought into the ER, being brought directly into a trauma room. Like it was really serious.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a medical professional here who was teaching us CPR, and we were talking about it. And I was saying to my fiance after, I'm like, I've never considered myself. I've always been, because it's like life has been hard. And so I'd never considered myself to be a fortunate person, but I'm extremely, like I shouldn't, for all intents and purposes, I should not have survived that.
Right.
And I should not have survived that in a way where I'm like fully functioning and like still got all my marbles for the most part.
Oh, somewhat.
Yeah, to a certain to probably the point I had before, which before that also wasn't all of them, likely. And we don't have to go super into that either, because I know that's really hard.
Yeah.
But do you mind talking about your experience with that a little bit, and like what the process was trying to get me into treatment after, and like struggling to do that? And
I remember the surprise of sitting in the ER and just waiting and not getting any information, and them just releasing you. Like it was just like you coming out in sweatpants and us crying, before we got in the car, like crying together, and you being scared and me being scared, and like, what next? Like there was no guidance, or they were just like, your piece of garbage kid is ready to be released, and here you go. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, why isn't she staying overnight, and why aren't you keeping her so that we can get prepared? But, it was, to a New Haven hospital ER, they're like, we see this like 12 times a day. So
it is crazy that they're like such a hole in the system, that I had like a really serious overdose. And regardless if someone comes in with like diagnosed psych and like drug issues, there was no talk of like going to, sorry if you just heard my hip hop, there was no talk of going to like even the psych ward or like seeing a social worker. It was just like they'd cut my clothes off, giving me like the Yale New Haven chic navy blue sweatsuit, tracksuit, and then being like, okay, we'll call you a taxi, I guess.
Yeah. And so bringing you home and working, I mean, I'm so fortunate for the place that I work. And my boss at the time was so supportive. And just being able to take that week off to like, it was just phone call after phone call, getting support from insurance. They would send me 3 places at a time. Only 3, like you can only do 3, and you had to call those 3. And from there, they would talk to you and figure out whether or not it was a good fit. And all of them were like, sorry, try someone else, including Mountainside, by the way.
Which
Sorry.
everything happens for a reason.
Yeah,
It's okay.
she needs a higher level of care.
Which I did, to be fair.
I know, but I remember just being so frustrated, and everything always had to be private care, and we were just like always just trying to figure out how do we get the money to front this money, and I was just like, can you just freaking lie when you're talking to them, like, so we can get you into one of these places that insurance will actually take? Like, just being so frustrated, but also like, obviously you needed to go where you needed to go. But it was like, oh my gosh, we just trying to find a place that would take you. And it wasn't easy. The system is so broken.
Yeah.
I actually started thinking about a career change. I'm a research scientist, but I was like, I need to go into patient advocacy and, for families. And it was just, it's such a terrible system. We were all so broken and dealing and traumatized and trying to find, and you were over 18. So there were certain things that we couldn't talk about and that they would only talk to you about. So finally finding a place, was really, really hard. It was really hard. And then, it was always, well, they have to go to detox first and us talking about, us being like, no, because we were so afraid of how we were going to pay for this.
Yeah.
And us being like, we're not taking on another thing of detox. We're going to have to I think we were supposed to bring you to one place and then fly you somewhere else. And I remember I had just done, a study at work, on a molecule that we were looking at for a drug, potential drug. And so I was very well versed in pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics of drugs being processed through the system. Mm-hmm. And I remember we had you tested and they found that there, for all the drugs that were in your system. And so I remember calling the place that we were bringing you to rehab because they dropped they were like, okay, bring her down. And then the last minute they were like, ooh, JK, stop off here. She has to go to detox first. And I was like, absolutely not. She's been with us. I was sleeping with you at night and you were not alone at all. We had taken all electronics from you. And so I figured out the pharmacokinetics and dynamics of every drug that was in your system and told them, this is how much she weighs. This is how much would have still been in her bloodstream. This is where it is now. And I finally, I wore them down and I remember bringing you to drop you off and they were like, damn, girl, you are one hard advocate for your child.
Yeah. Good.
And being able to, leave you the first rehab.
Yeah, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Which it was longer than 30 days. I think I needed longer than 30 days. It
was 3 months. Yeah.
And then after I went to Minnesota, and so just to skip ahead a little bit, when I was out in Minnesota, I stayed sober, loosely in the loosest sense of the word, for a couple of months. I wasn't doing hard drugs and drinking for a couple months, basically. And then it escalated very quickly. I relapsed right before New Year's and things got ugly pretty fast. Went home for Christmas and flew back, I think, New Year's Eve, that day. So after I went back, it was a period of time where I was trying to lie about using, but I obviously something was wrong with my behavior was weird. I looked bad. And so what was that like having to, because you ended up flying out to come retrieve me?
Yeah. So I would talk to your boyfriend at the time. She can't come to the phone. She's got the flu.
I'm so sick all the time.
Yeah, she's so sick.
I did get the flu at one point, to be fair.
Yeah. Well, and knowing that you weren't okay and telling, and saying I know you're getting high and you're like, what? No, I'm not. Until finally, you were getting kicked out of, you couldn't keep your apartment. I think you had said, like, all right, I need some help, but you were only asking because you knew that like you were about to get kicked out.
Yeah, I was
So,
uncomfortable.
yeah.
I didn't want to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. So it was like, oh, mom, come rescue me. And so I went under the presumption and the agreement that you were coming back with me to Connecticut, and we were going to get you into a sober living situation in the Northeast. And when I got there, we were in the hotel, and you had changed your mind. You were like, I don't really think I want to come back. I'm not ready. And me realizing, wow, I cannot do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And me telling you like, oh, okay, but if I leave, I'm like, you need to know I'm not coming back. I'm never coming back.
Yeah, I think what you told me, the next time like I come back will be basically to like pick up your body. Because like obviously things weren't, I wasn't doing hot. Wasn't doing well.
Yeah. And us, me crying and you kind of sitting there like, when's this going to be over? And you finally, I think you were texting with your boyfriend, and he was just like, just go home and get the help. And so you ultimately agreed to come home. But the second you got home, it was just like, I'm not going anywhere. I brought you to sober living situations in Maine and I think in Rhode Island. And you're like, I'm not going here. And just, me trying to be accommodating to a certain extent. But, obviously that wasn't going to work. And me saying like, okay, the choice is no longer yours. You're going somewhere or you're getting out. Like you either agree for me to drop you off at a sober home, or we are literally moving your stuff out of the house, and you are out of the house.
Yeah, you said it's like by the end of the week at a certain point.
By Wednesday.
It was like going to a shelter or going somewhere.
Yeah.
And because I'd been getting high the entire time I was at home too. And it's like I didn't want to. I mean, anyone that's like been gets, it's like I don't want to get, like I wasn't at a point even though things are so bad. And that's why it's always when people are like, oh, I haven't hit my bottom, or this is my bottom, I haven't hit my bottom. It's like, it's so relative. Like there are so many things on paper that should have been okay, I'm done, like writings on the wall, but it wasn't. It's like, it's not, your bottom is when you put down the shovel and you stop digging.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like what they say in the rooms. And that's like very true for me. So I ended up going up to Maine. Became evident pretty quickly when I was in Maine that things were not going well. I was continuing to use while I was in a sober house. It was conveniently, for my purposes, it was a sober house that was foreclosing. And so they couldn't afford drug tests.
Yeah.
It was also so cold. It was like no hot water, and it was Maine.
In the winter.
Yeah, it was brutal. But things got pretty bleak for me pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But that was also when you started like going more hands off, and you stopped. And this is what I always like when I speak at meetings and stuff, like this was the best thing for me. And I talk about how like brave you were to do the stuff you did, when it's like you cut off like phone service for me. Like I didn't have phone. Yeah. And so like you letting go of that sense of control that you had, where it's like you no longer could see my location, could see like what was going on. Because and you've talked about this, where it's like that was a false sense of control. Like you could feel like you knew what was going on because you could see where I was, but like, what does that mean? Like you don't.
It just means we know where your body is.
Yeah, that's all you know. Yeah. And so that, and also when things were uncomfortable and like I was getting drug tested and I was worried I wouldn't be able to get myself out of this one. I was like, oh, like now maybe I'm ready. And you were like, okay, like find what the local, like the closest shelter is, and like pack a bag and go there if you get kicked out. And I was like, come on, but that's the boundary. Like I needed to not be caught before I fell anymore. Like that wasn't helpful for me. I wasn't uncomfortable enough. It wasn't like I never hit a point where I was just like spiritually bankrupt, because it's like right before I got to that point, I would be rescued to some capacity. And so that was the first time you like let go of the rein, like let me fall. And I'm sure like that was the most selfless thing you could have done. I'm certain that was incredibly scary for you.
Yeah, it was awful. And so I think that this was like the aha moment of the manipulation. And I knew, how manipulative you could be, but this was something that I saw the switch right before my eyes because we were FaceTiming. And you're always very good at apologizing and coming clean about, like, oh, I know I did this and I did that. And you always knew how to back yourself out of things. But you would say the right things and you were crying and we were both crying and I'm ready for help and I'm going to get kicked out and me telling you like, okay, like, all right, well, you can go to a shelter and then, we'll figure out from there. And when you realized we weren't coming to rescue you, you turned off the crying right away. And then you were like, like kind of like, just like, all right, whatever. And I remember, it was like that. It was like somebody like threw bucket of ice water over me. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, this is where, and that's when I said, I had told, your dad, like, we need to shut off service for her phone. She's just using it to score drugs.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. And he would, and like the thought of like, yeah, we won't know where she is. And I'm like, doesn't matter if we know where she is. We know what she's doing, and I'm not going to help her do that anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, told everybody your ex-boyfriend was planning on going to see you because you had reached out to him. And I said, don't go see her. She's just going to ask you for money. She's looking for, don't give her anything. And, telling your sister, like, you can't talk to her. She needs to get help. And telling you, like, we are here. If you call and you want us to put you back in treatment, we are here for that.
Yeah. Anything else, though?
Yeah. Other than that, lose my number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's eventually I got to the point where I reached out and I was ready for treatment. And then you guys came up next day. I remember it was like 10 a.m. Not a morning person, never will be a morning person. And so you knew I couldn't get up to much more mischief before then because I'm not getting up before like 9:30. Like, be so for real. That's what I always say. It's like go to any lengths to get sober. I've never been willing to go to like a morning meeting consistently because of that reason. Like, that is too far. You're asking too much of me.
It's a bridge too far.
Yeah, excuse me. Be so real right now. Yeah, and so... Yeah, and the manipulation, they talk about that in the big book too, where it's like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing. Like, they can be great people when they're sober and have all of these things going for them, and then you put the drugs and alcohol in their way, and that's all that matters. And I said this to Lydia too when I made amends to her, where it's like, I never, like, me choosing drugs all of this time or choosing alcohol, it didn't mean I didn't love you and I didn't care about you. It's like at the time I was sick and that's like the only choice I felt like I had. And it was also tunnel vision. It doesn't mean that I don't care about all these other things or love all these other people. Yeah. That's just not enough, like when you're an alcoholic. But so I ended up going to treatment, and it was a year-long treatment program. There was another like battle to like get me into treatment, of course, naturally. I don't make things easy. We get it. And when I was there was a lot of options and like resources for families, and you dove headfirst into that.
Oh, for sure.
And
they really encouraged it.
Yeah.
Some of it was required, which I think was excellent because you really, they're like, you're asking her to go to meetings and ask for numbers and talk to strangers and get a sponsor. You guys sit in it for a little bit. And so us being in meetings, and we were required, like, ask 3 people for their number. And it's uncomfortable, right? Like, so stop being like, you just have to do this, if you're not even willing to do this. So for me, I didn't feel right asking you to do any of this stuff if I wasn't willing to do it. And so, I felt like the only way that I can be a parent to an addict was to learn the language and to learn how to take care of myself spiritually, emotionally, and be uncomfortable. Like, and obviously we had been pretty freaking uncomfortable for years, but that was you making us uncomfortable. Like me making myself uncomfortable. which is huge. And I'm, I mean, my closest friend is always like, oh yeah, yeah, oh, your journey, you're always making yourself
No.
uncomfortable. Oh, you got to grow.
Yeah.
And that's been like really my journey since all of this, because I feel like all of this has made me a better person. So, going to these meetings and meeting other parents and supporting other parents and talking to other parents and realizing like our story is not unique in any way. You're not special.
Mhm.
I'm not special. Like this is all pretty textbook. And it's how, I mean, they say like nothing changes if nothing changes. So we had to change really everything. And I think the biggest change for me too was, you 6 months into your program and you weren't calling as often, you weren't leaning on us as often. You had case managers and we were required, you had certain rules. And me just always being an open book with your case managers was a big thing that, they taught us about triangulation and how you'd always try, like how an addict will always try and triangulate, a certain, like the people that are authorities in their lives. And I remember you sharing that you had had your friend come and pick you up for coffee one day once you had gotten access to a phone, a flip phone, mind you. And you sharing that with me and saying, please don't tell, like I'll get in trouble. And me feeling so bad about it, but me calling your case manager and saying, hey, by the way, she shared this with me. I told her that I will not lie for her. I've told her I want her to share this with you. I'm hoping she does.
I also don't think I got in trouble for that because I don't think I did anything wrong.
I think you got your phone privileges taken away for like a couple of days
Well,
or
they
something
also
like that.
they wouldn't take away my phone because I had a flip phone, so they felt bad. They're like, you have nothing to lose. Like they would take away the clients that had like smartphones, but they're like, what are you gonna do with that? Listen
Right.
to the radio?
Yeah.
Like, okay, you're gonna play Snake on your flip phone?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't remember. Yeah, there weren't a lot of repercussions, but you did come clean.
Yeah.
But only because I said, I'm not, and I lied to you and here I am. I'll make amends now. I lied to you.
Yeah.
I am, your dad says I'm painfully honest. And honest to a fault, if you will. And I had told your case manager about it, but I lied to you about it because I wanted to give you the opportunity to come clean. And I told you flat out, if she asks me about anything, because we checked in every week, I'm not lying for you. And so I think that was another moment where it was like, okay, you're not going to be able to guilt me into lying for you. Like, oh, I might get in trouble. Like I made it very clear whose side I was on. And it was on the side of your sobriety and your team who was trying to help you.
Yeah, my case manager
yeah.
said to you that now, as like 7 years later, that you were her favorite parent of all the parents because you were so like, yeah, you do it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. You do it.
Yeah. And tell me what to do and I'll do it.
And you got into Al-Anon when I was like a couple months
6
sober
months,
too.
yeah.
And now, present day, like this is 7 years later, you still actively, like you have a home group.
Yeah.
You do service, like you're still actively a part of that, which I think speaks to what it has done in your life. And I know we've talked about this, but for like everybody else out there, why do you continue to do Al-Anon?
It makes me a better person. I think being working in this, or not working in this, but working on myself, it's like cultivating a garden, right? So like if you can plant a garden, but if you just plant it and walk away, weeds are going to show up and it's going to go to crap. I feel like my soul is that same way. I feel like there are plenty of times that I can backpedal and I can, fall into old habits. Going to a meeting keeps me working on myself. And your sister has said, like, oh, don't go to the meeting tonight. Are you going to go to the meeting? And I'm like, there were a couple weeks where I had to miss. And I'm like, trust me. I'm like, I'm a better person when I'm going to these meetings because it keeps me on that path. It keeps me from, judgment. It keeps me focusing on me. And how I can work different, different traditions and, kind of slogans, like you realize, wow, they all actually mean something. And you're, I got into the program because I was asking you, oh, did you go to a meeting? And you're like, hey, Mom, how about you get your own meeting? I was a little irritated by that. But yeah, I stay in it because I'm required to work on myself. Like, these people see me and they know whether or not I'm working on myself, and they'll call me out if I'm not.
Yeah, and this is what I mean when I say, like, ideal recovery parent, because it's ideally your parent or your loved one, like, continues to grow and continues to meet you where you're at, and that's not always the case. And obviously neither of us are perfect, but we both make an effort.
Right.
But yeah, thank you for coming and hanging out. I think this has been good. And I think that this is also helpful for a lot of people because it's a family disease. There are lots of resources for the alcoholic. Mountainside, luckily, also has resources for the family. But a lot of times it takes a lot for the family to even admit that they need resources. Like, even you've shared that has what's hard for you at a certain point with Al-Anon. Like, it sucked being recommended to go to it.
Right.
What do you know? Drug
You're the
addicts.
one with the problem. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for coming out. And I'll take you out to coffee after this.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, Mountainside can help. Call 860-365-6764 to speak with our caring treatment team.